Hi, my name is Lanita, and I will be talking about women and how they function in politics as well as femininity and such. Before starting, I would like to remind you guys that because of the nature of the topic, it does get pretty upsetting. I'm sure you have came across some of the content from the reading that we did. So throughout history, war has always been used as a means to expand and defend territories. So therefore, it has been a central part of political history since it was written, and unfortunately it has been profoundly gendered along with the utilization of rape as a weapon of war, and in some cases linked with nationalist and ethnic royalties. And battle has always been perceived as the ultimate test of both individual and collective manhood, and it is always been justified as a form of defend those who could not defend themselves, especially targeted towards children and women. And the victors were always portrayed as a masculine and virile, and the loser are always portrayed as the unmanly or feminized. And the story of women that is engaged in combat generally serve to highlight just special few occasions, just to amplify how serious the nature of the battles are. It was as if like the battle was so severe to the point that women also had to fight, also had to join the fight to symbolize bravery beyond normal expectation. And in many cultures, these women somehow have to disguise themselves as men to join them. So they are usually androgynous warriors such as Hua Mulan. Aside from physical combat, women have also been an important part in providing supplies until the development of modern armies to support and supply their own services. Thousands of women later termed as camp followers. Basically, they are the one who accompanied the armies of mercenary troops that fought and marauded across Europe between 4050 and 1650. Basically, these armies depended on pillage and plunders. They were very violent and live in military camps involved very hard physical labor for everyone. And basically, these plunder and pillages are done by soldiers themselves, but more often than not, they are usually done by women and children, so that there is a sense of gender transgression as well as hypermasculinity. I believe at first, especially in the first epics from many parts of the world, they often portray male comradeship, often tested in battle, and often seen as the highest form of human connection, and would see any attachment to women as weakening. And this idea kind of permeates throughout the Western culture until Shakespeare history plays viewed as extensive concern with heterosexual conquests as evidence of effeminacy. In addition to that, strong same-sex relationship often regarded as and portrayed as better soldiers, but it was at no cost at sexual relations at all, or at least no sexual relation that led to offspring. The earliest recorded example of this is in Europe, in the city of Athens during the 5th and the 4th century of BCE. And basically the easiest way to become a citizen was to become the son of one. Basically become the citizen of Athens. This ceremony goes such as a citizen father have to lay his son on the floor of the house and give him a name, rather than his actual physical birth, mark a boy legal birth, and was not carried out for girls. So basically at the time, women were not citizens in Athens and basically have no political role at all. And this is important because both in Athenian reality and in Plato's Republic, having a political voice is often linked with having a financial and legal independence. So basically, anyone who doesn't have that, such as slaves and people who work for a living, were certainly not free being. And this also included women, because they are mostly seen as property of a married man, or basically a political pawn for a family that kind of places them in a dependent relationship. The notion of citizenship continued in the Mediterranean after hereditary monarchies again come up to power. And then women as well as men were kind of officially described as citizens in legal cases. And in the Roman Empire, even the children of the former slave could eventually become a citizen. And being a citizen of a town kind of gave one a preferential legal treatment as well as certain privileges. But it also brought obligations such as duty to pay taxes and to defend the city if it was attacked. And this was rather a new concept of women to be accepted as legal citizens, and this kind of began to change in the 16th century. And then the concept of national citizenship that developed in the 17th and the 18th century built on this more and more gender tradition, because they were beginning to put more emphasis on the annual oath swearing of a symbol of citizenship and kind of regard women's citizenship as secondary or as passive, whereas men was active. And of course, as we know, the debate still continues. There are many cases and examples and fights to be fought throughout the century to reach that point of gender equality and of such. So on to the next topic, which is colonialism, anti-colonialism, and post-colonialism. Basically, this discourse is quite often interdisciplinary in nature. It combines artistic and literary evidence with more traditional and historical documents because of the strong theoretical emphasis on its post-colonial theory. Basically, imperial power and the ideas of nation were explicitly and implicitly linked with gender and the cultural construction of masculinity and femininity for both the colonizer and the colonized. And usually it manifests into opinions about indigenous people and how women are seen as less attractive, less civilized in a less restrictive dress, and they're often seen as a sexual looseness, while men's lack of facial hair and trousers often a sign of effeminacy and inferiority, and any other moral pattern other than permanent monogamy is also seen as a sign of barbarity. There is also a resistance to colonialism in Africa and Asia after World War II. Both men and women were active in all types of revolution and opposition, though usually the official voice that emerge that is of a man. And nationalist movement and young men particularly form in the majority of all military units. On top of that, the new nation established as a result of these anti-colonial struggles that they have been going through had to address what was described as the women question, which is basically they had to determine whether what kind of legal and social status and repercussion women should and would be. Many of the struggles women experience are often dismissed and looked over because they were not regarded as a high priority, and there are very few women who had high political position, and they are generally related to men with political power as well. And one of the examples that came up on my mind immediately is Virginia Woolf. She was able to fortunately write because of her husband. And on top of that, many of the history that are written about new nations that had just emerged mostly focus on the discourse of nationalism and by default the efforts that have been achieved to fight for women's rights often are neglected and unfortunately downplay the actions of the actual women that had fought. On top of that, there has been many progress been made in the sphere of communism because of the Marxist utopia. Karl Marx promise in his Communist Manifesto, which is the equality between male and female subjects under the umbrella of communism. So I guess my question would be, I know we have talked so far about how misogynistic war can be towards women, but I'd like to know your guys' opinion on how does exactly war and trauma affect masculinity, especially in the long run. I'd like to emphasize on how hypermasculinity manifests in the unconscious, especially in the 1970s and 1980s America. So thank you.